Hello. In this video, we're going to look at how we program and plug in our circuits for the egg timer challenge. So if you've got to that video already, this is Pico challenge number 1. We're going to make some egg timers. So it might be that you've got some wires plugged in already. Maybe you have pulled them all out in order to store your Pico away. So maybe the first thing that we need to do is to think about which of these components we're going to be using. So if we look at the description, I'll just get it on the screen there. There we go. Here, right, now you can see all of it. I'll move that out of the way again in a moment. So here you can see that we have got a number of different things that we're going to use for our egg timer challenge. The first thing is that the Pico LED is going to be used. We're going to flash that Pico LED on and off. So you can see that in the first line of code from the Pico 0 library, which is our beginner's library that we're using, I'm going to import the Pico LED. Then to activate the timer, I want to press button 1. So I'm going to need to use a button. Now I've got button 1 here, plugged into a red cable, and my button 1 is coming over here into GP10. And actually all of my buttons are plugged in into GP10, 11, 12 and 13. So I've got a little set of 4 wires there, those 4 wires. And they are coming over here to the button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4. And I've made sure that they're all in the same order. The colours are in the same order. Now you can see this bottom wire here, the orange one, is connecting to the buzzer. So my GP pin for my buzzer, I'm using GP15 here. And because it's really nice and close to the buzzer there. So GP15, that is going to control my buzzer. Then over on this side, because we're going to number 3, part 3 of the challenge says that when the timer is activated, LED 1 should be lit up. So I've plugged a wire into LED 1 and I brought that one over onto the right hand side of the Pico, and this is going into pin 21. Now when you're using the pins right in the middle of the Pico board here, it's really important to just count very carefully up from the bottom or down from the top, so you make sure you put them in the right place. So there is my setup. We'll come back to looking at the LEDs in a moment. I will make sure it's all on the screen for you. But for now, let's go back to our Thonny code and let's see if we can begin to introduce the code that we need. Well, as I've just run through all of those GP pins, we need to now tell our Pico, by the way, I've plugged in LED 1 into GP21, because at the moment the Pico doesn't know that. So we need to write all of these in. And here they all are. Now I've just copied and pasted them in. Let's go through them one by one. Button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4. I've named those with BTN1. It's quite short. It clearly stands for button, doesn't it? It's just shorter to type. So that is my choice of name. You could call them Bob, Jim and Fred if you wanted, but you might forget which one's which. That is equal to, now we need to use this button object that we've brought in from the library here. So here we go. Here's button up here. So I need to write it in exactly the same way as it appears up here. If we use a lowercase b, then the Python code will say, I'm sorry, I can't import that from the Pico 0 library. It's not in there. So the capital letter is really important. And then you can see I've put in the pin numbers 10, 11, 12 and 13. And here I've also got this little bit of information, which if you've looked at my other videos, you'll see is all about working out when I press the button, is it on? Or when I release the button, is it on? And buttons need to be either on or off. We don't want them to be floating somewhere in the middle. So whereas other pins may have a floating voltage, which may be maybe up to near the maximum voltage, maybe down near ground, could be anything in the middle. If the Pico is not controlling it, then those GP pins are what we call floating and could have any voltage on them. The buttons, on the other hand, we want them not to be floating in a sort of middling voltage. We want them either to be switched on, to be at maximum power, or we want them down at ground. That means 0 volts. So then it's really clear whether we have pressed the button or not. So these have got these little, these don't have the pull-up resistors, so they will be pulled down to ground when they are not being used. So that's just a little bit of extra electronics details. You don't need to know much about it. All you need to remember is that when we press the button now, that switches the button on. So I've done that for all 4 buttons. And then for LED 1, that is my name for LED 1 because it corresponds to the pin number over here. And again, I'm using this LED object that I brought in from the Pico Zero library. Now, I could use a digital LED, and we're going to look at that in a subsequent video, but for now, this works fine. Then finally, the buzzer. The buzzer is going into pin 15, and here is my buzzer that I have imported as well. So we need to make sure that we've imported each of these and that we have used the right spellings as we have defined all of our buttons and pins and things. Make sure we've got the right numbers in there. There's quite a lot to do just to make sure that all of this is correct. But what we'll do now, just to get a little bit of code working, is we're just going to, I'm going to show you one little thing. We're just going to blink the Pico LED. I'm going to run the code. Now, if you run the code and it says can't find the Pico Zero library or something like that, it might be that you've not switched it over to MicroPython. Can you see in the bottom right hand corner of Thonny, you should have your MicroPython Raspberry Pi Pico message. If you've not got that, if you've got local Python 3, then that is trying to run the Python code on your laptop or your computer or whatever you've plugged this into. We want this code to actually run on this Pico, so we need to have selected the MicroPython Pico option. So here we can see the little Pico is just blinking away quite happily, and it will do that until we press stop on the code. So that is the first part done. While the Pico is running, the Pico LED flashes on and off. Now, secondly, to activate the timer, we want to press button 1. Well, if you watched the video on doing more than one thing at once, then you might remember how we did this. So we are going to use button 1. So that is the code that we will use. And actually, I'm going to come and bring this up here. So the order of how we're going to do things is going to be a little bit changed. Our Pico LED blink is going to be right at the bottom. And we have this property called when pressed. When button 1 is pressed, I'll bring this up here, we want to do something. What do we want to do? Well, we want to activate a timer. I'm just going to call mine timer for now. I've just made that up. Could have called it Jeffrey. Haven't called it Jeffrey though, have I? I've called it timer, but I need to now explain what to do when timer is called. So here we go. I am going to define timer. Now, as usual, we're very lazy computer scientists. We don't like to write too much. So DEF has to stand in for define. That means I am now about to describe when I call this timer function, what is it actually that I'm going to do? Let's take a look. Well, the first thing that's going to happen is that when this timer is activated, LED 1 should be lit up. Let's do that. How are we going to light up LED 1? Well, this is what I've called it, LED 1. Look, and you can see the highlighting there. It's just showing me what it's doing. Let's just switch it on, shall we? Let's see. if this now works. So I've got my little Pico LED going there, so that's all good. And now I need to move the code so you can see what's going on. There we go. And now let's press button 1. And can you see it? Now I've got a red light here. Yours might be green. But now look, I've released button 1. I've taken my finger off and LED 1 is still lit up. And the little Pico LED is flashing away very merrily. Okay, so I have started to do what I need to do. There's still quite a few more things. Let's take a look and see what the next thing is to do. Number 4. When the end time is reached, the buzzer should beep at least 10 times. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to come in here. We want to create a timer. Now, just for now, I'm just going to do it with a little sleep function. I'm just going to do a little 3-second timer. So the LED is going to come on. I'm going to sleep for 3 seconds while I count to 3. That's my little timer going. And at the end of it, I'm going to make the buzzer beep. So what did we call buzzer? Here's my name for it. I've called it buzz. So buzz is going to beep. Now, do you remember what we put in here? Well, the first number is how many seconds it's going to be on for. So I'm just going to go to do a tiny little beep, 0.1 of a second, very short little beep. That's how long the beep is being on. Then it's how long is it going to be off for? So I'm going to do 0.3. And then how many times is it going to beep? Well, I need to do at least 10. All right, let's run this code. Let's see what happens now. You see at each instance when I've done a little bit of code, I'm going to run it. I'm going to see, is it doing what I want it to? So it's up and running. I've got my Pico LED flashing to show that it's working. Here I'm going to press button 1. There, it's lit up. There. Okay, and I don't know how well that comes across on the video, but that has just beeped at me 10 times. Can I do it again? Well, the LED hadn't switched off. But there's the beeping. It did happen a second time. So what I need to do now is I need to make sure that the LED switches off at the end of the timer, and also that I can deactivate this timer by pressing one of the other buttons. So let's see how we're going to do that. One thing that I might just do here as well, just to show on the screen, and you might like to do this as well, I'm just going to put a little print statement in here just to show which timer we have done. So I could just call this button 1 press, but actually this is a 3-second timer. So I'm just going to say 3-second timer activated. Little print statements like that really help you to see where you are in your code and to see whether buttons have been pressed correctly and things like that. So let's come to the deactivation. Now let's come down to our instructions. To stop the buzzer from beeping, press button 2. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it near the activate. Look, button 1 when pressed equals timer. Let's do button 2 when pressed. Okay. When I press button 2, I want to deactivate the timer. So maybe I'll make a little bit of code called deactivate. I've just made that up. Let's tell Python, what do I mean when I say deactivate? So, and I need to do this higher up in the code because otherwise Python is going to get to this line 25 and say, well, you've not told me what to do on deactivate. So I'm going to kick up an error now. So we need to have already explained, by the way, when you see the word deactivate, this is what you're going to do. What do we want to do? Well, we want the buzzer to stop, don't we? So what's that? Buzz. Let's just switch it off. How about that? What else do we want to have running? Let's see if I've got it here. Down here, number 6, when the timer is deactivated, LED 1 should switch off. So let's do that as well. Let's put that in here. How do we switch off LED 1? Well, we had LED 1 dot on earlier, so let's do LED 1 dot off. So I've switched off the buzzer, I've switched off the LED, and I'm also going to pop in a little print statement just to show that I have actually done this and the button has been pressed. Timer deactivated. Here we go. Let's run this code and see what happens. So I'll give you a little bit more space here to see what's going on there. So are we ready? Let's press the button. I'm going to press button 1. Here we go. The LEDs come on. 3-second timer activated. Oh, there's the beeping. Oh, I stopped it. Did you see? I pressed button 2 and I stopped it. So it didn't beep 10 times. Let's see if I can just stop it after 3 beeps. Here we go. I'm going to switch it on. It's going to count 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 beeps, and I'm going to switch it off. And it stopped the buzzing, the beeping, and it switched off the LED 1. Okay, why don't you see if you can make your code do this if you've not got this far already?